November in New York meant brutal cold that cut through cheap fabric like it wasn't there. I'd been on my feet for 14 hours straight, serving overpriced pasta to tourists who tipped like they were doing charity work. My uniform smelled like garlic and desperation, and all I wanted was to collapse into bed at my studio apartment and forget this day existed. The back door of Rossetti's bistro opened into an alley that smelled perpetually of garbage and broken promises. I'd taken this route 1,000 times. But tonight something was different. Laughter echoed off the brick walls, the kind that made my skin crawl. Sharp and cruel, the sound of people enjoying someone else's pain. I should have kept walking. Smart people in this city knew when to mind their business. I'd never been accused of being particularly smart. 3 teenage boys had surrounded someone smaller, their phones held high, recording. The blue glow from their screens illuminated a child, maybe 8 or 9 years old, wearing what had probably been an expensive private school uniform before it got soaked through and streaked with mud. The kid was crying, not the loud wailing kind, but the silent, hiccuping sobs that came from pure terror. "Come on, rich boy," one of the teenagers jeered, shoving the kid toward another. "Where's your mommy and daddy now? Can't buy your way out of this one?" The child stumbled, hitting the wet pavement hard. His hands scraped across concrete, and fresh tears streamed down his face. My bags hit the ground before I'd consciously decided to move. "Hey!" My voice came out harder than I'd intended. Years of dealing with drunk customers and handsy managers packed into that single syllable. Back the hell away from him. The 3 boys turned, and I got my first good look at them. 17, maybe 18, wearing designer sneakers and jackets that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Rich kids slumming it, looking for entertainment. "This doesn't concern you, lady," the tallest one said. But his voice wavered. Good. He should be scared. I pulled out my phone, angling it at them. "Really? Because it looks like you're assaulting a child and posting it online. That's funny because I can see your faces really clearly. And look at that. Your friend there has a varsity jacket with a name on it. St. Augustine Preparatory. How helpful." The kid with the jacket, Marcus, according to the embroidery, went pale. "We were just messing around." "Messing around?" I moved between them and the crying child. "You were terrorizing someone half your size and filming it for your little social media circus. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to delete those videos, you're going to give me your names, and then you're going to disappear before I decide whether involving the cops is worth my time." "You can't," the 3rd boy started. "I took screenshots of your faces in that jacket already." I lied smoothly. "They're uploading to my cloud right now. So you can either cooperate, or tomorrow morning your school, your parents, and every college you're applying to gets to see what kind of people you really are. Your choice." The reality of consequences hit them all at once. They scrambled to delete videos, stammering out names I immediately memorized, then practically ran from the alley, their expensive sneakers splashing through puddles. I turned to the child, who had curled into himself against the brick wall, shaking so hard I could hear his teeth chattering. Rain had plastered his dark hair to his forehead, and his eyes, when they met mine, were huge and terrified. "Hey," I said softly, crouching down to his level but keeping some distance. Cornered animals bit, and traumatized kids weren't much different. They're gone. You're safe now. He didn't respond, just stared at me like he couldn't quite process that the threat had vanished. His breathing was coming too fast. Panic attack territory. I'd seen this before. My mother, during her final months with cancer, had panic attacks that left her gasping and disoriented. The therapist had taught me techniques, ways to ground someone when their mind was spiraling. Without thinking about how expensive my coat probably was compared to my bank account, I shrugged it off and draped it around his small shoulders. Then I did something that probably broke every stranger danger rule in the book. I sat down on the wet, cold pavement beside him, not hovering, not demanding anything, just present. "You don't have to talk," I told him quietly. "You don't have to do anything. Just breathe with me, okay? In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4. I demonstrated, exaggerating my breathing so he could follow. He watched me, his chest still heaving. But slowly, incrementally, he began to match my rhythm. Minutes passed. The rain kept falling, soaking through my uniform, But I didn't move. I started humming, barely aware I was doing it until the melody registered. An old Italian lullaby my mother used to sing, before the cancer stole her voice. I'd hummed it to her in those final weeks when she couldn't sleep, when the pain was too much for words. The child's breathing steadied. His shaking began to subside. He pulled my coat tighter around himself, and something in his posture shifted from pure panic to exhaustion. "Kayla." Brittany's voice cut through the sound of rain. My co-worker and closest friend in this city appeared in the alley entrance, her blonde hair darkening under the downpour. "What the hell are you doing out here? I've been looking everywhere." She stopped, taking in the scene. Me, soaked and sitting in a puddle. The child, wrapped in my coat, still trembling. "Oh my God, is he okay?" "Some kids were bullying him," I said. "Filming it. I handled it." Brittany knew that tone. It meant I'd done something reckless, and probably right. She moved closer, her bartender instincts kicking in. Should we call someone? Police? His parents? Before I could answer, the sound of engines roared into the alley. 3 black SUVs, the kind with windows tinted so dark they looked like they absorbed light, screeched to a halt at the alley entrance, blocking any exit. "Kayla," Brittany whispered urgently, grabbing my arm. "We need to go. Now." But it was too late for that. Doors flew open, and men poured out. 6, 7, maybe more. They wore dark suits that somehow remained crisp despite the weather, and every single one of them moved with the fluid purpose of people trained for violence. And they were all armed. I could see the bulges under their jackets, the way their hands hovered near concealed weapons. Luca. One of them, built like a linebacker with a scar running down his jaw, rushed forward. His face transformed from professional menace to genuine relief when he saw the child. "Thank God. Sir, we found him." "Sir." My stomach dropped. The last man to emerge from the lead SUV didn't rush. He didn't need to. The others parted for him automatically, an unconscious acknowledgement of hierarchy that spoke volumes. He was tall, probably 6'2" or 6'3", with the kind of build that came from discipline rather than vanity. Dark hair swept back from a face that belonged on Roman coins, all sharp angles and aristocratic features. His suit was charcoal gray, perfectly tailored, probably worth more than every piece of clothing I'd ever owned combined. But it was his eyes that held me frozen, dark, almost black, and currently locked onto me with an intensity that made breathing difficult. Those eyes swept over me, cataloging every detail. My soaked uniform, my position on the ground beside his son, the protective way I'd angled myself between the child and potential threats. "Luca," he said, and his voice carried the kind of authority that made powerful men nervous. "Come here." The boy, Luca, scrambled up and ran to him. The man caught him, lifting him easily despite the mud and rain, holding him close in a way that softened every harsh line of his face. "Papa, she helped me," Luca managed, his voice rough from crying. "The boys, they were—" "I know. Shh, it's okay now." The man's hand cupped the back of Luca's head, protective and gentle. Then his gaze returned to me, and the gentleness evaporated. "Who are you?" I stood slowly, very aware of the armed men watching my every move. Brittany had gone rigid beside me, her hand still gripping my arm like a lifeline. "Nobody," I said. "Just someone who doesn't like seeing kids get hurt." "Nobody?" He repeated the word like he was tasting it, finding it wanting. "You intervened when multiple assailants were attacking my son. You stayed with him until we arrived. That's not nobody." The way he said my son carried weight. Possession, yes, but also warning. This child was his, and anyone who touched Luca, for good or ill, became his concern. One of the men stepped forward, the same one who'd called out first. "Sir, should we—" "Get Luca to the car. Dry clothes. Call Dr. Reeves. Have her meet us at home." The man's orders were crisp, automatic. Then to Luca, "Go with Marco. I need to speak with this woman." "But Papa—" "Now, Luca." The boy went, but kept looking back at me. Marco, the linebacker, wrapped Luca in a jacket and guided him toward the middle SUV, speaking in low, soothing tones, which left me facing the man who terrified everyone around him, while Brittany's fingernails dug into my arm hard enough to bruise. "My name is Anthony Ferraro," he said, and I watched recognition flicker across Brittany's face. She knew that name. Whatever it meant, it wasn't good. "You helped my son when he was in danger. That creates a debt." "There's no debt," I said quickly. Any decent person would have done the same thing, but they didn't. His gaze flicked toward the restaurant, the busy street beyond. How many people walked past this alley tonight? How many heard him crying and kept going? He had a point, but accepting that meant accepting whatever came next. "Look, I'm glad he's safe. That's all that matters. I should get home." "Your name," Anthony Ferraro said. Not a request. Every survival instinct screamed at me to lie, to give a fake name and disappear into the city's anonymity, but I'd already been seen by a dozen armed men. My co-worker stood beside me. I worked at a restaurant 50 feet away. The time for anonymity had passed the moment I'd opened my mouth in this alley. "Kayla Grant. Kayla Grant," he repeated, and somehow hearing my name in his voice made it sound different. Significant. "How long have you worked at Rossetti's?" 3 years. Confusion mixed with my fear. Why does that matter? Everything matters. He pulled out his phone, typed something quickly. One of his men approached, whispered in his ear. Anthony nodded once. "You're 26. You work doubles 4 nights a week. You're paying off medical debt from your mother's cancer treatment. You live alone in Queens." Ice flooded my veins. "How the hell do you know that?" "I make it my business to know about people who interact with my son. No apology, no shame." He'd investigated me in the span of minutes. "You could have called the police. Instead, you personally confronted 3 teenagers and sat in the rain with a traumatized child. Why?" "Because he needed someone," I said, anger finally overriding fear. "And I'm not going to apologize for basic human decency." For the first time, his expression shifted. Not quite a smile, but something in his eyes warmed fractionally. "No apology necessary. As I said, you've created a debt. I always repay what I owe. I don't want—" "You'll hear from me soon, Miss Grant." He turned to leave, then paused. "The boys who hurt Luca? You have their names?" Red flags erupted in my mind. "I'm not giving you names so I can ensure they face appropriate consequences through legal channels," he interrupted smoothly. "I'm not a monster, despite what you're clearly thinking. But those boys need to learn that actions have repercussions." I hesitated, then rattled off the 3 names I'd memorized. If he could find out my entire life history in 5 minutes, he could track down 3 rich kids from St. Augustine Prep. Anthony Ferraro nodded, committed them to memory with the same efficiency I had. "Go home, Miss Grant. Get warm. And be careful walking alone at night. Not everyone in this city is as fortunate as Luca was tonight." Then he was gone, sliding into the lead SUV with fluid grace. The vehicles pulled away in perfect synchronization, leaving Brittany and me standing in the rain-soaked alley. "Kayla," Brittany breathed, her voice shaking. "Do you have any idea who that was?" "Anthony Ferraro," I repeated dumbly. He seemed intense. Intense? Jesus Christ, Kayla. She pulled me toward the restaurant's back entrance. "Anthony Ferraro runs half the organized crime in this city. The Ferraro family, she lowered her voice even though we were alone. They're Mafia. Real, actual Mafia." The ground felt unsteady under my feet. "It can. And you just saved his kid." Brittany's eyes were wide with a mixture of terror and awe, which means you're either the luckiest person alive or you just made the biggest mistake of your life. I looked down at my soaked uniform, my empty hands where my coat used to be, and thought about a little boy's terrified eyes finding relief in a stranger's face. "I'd do it again," I said quietly. "I know." Brittany squeezed my shoulder. "That's what scares me." We grabbed our things and left through the back, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Twice on my subway ride home, I caught glimpses of a dark sedan that might have been following. My apartment building's usual shadows felt heavier, populated with threats I couldn't see but knew were there. I locked my door, engaged the deadbolt, and stood under a scalding shower until my skin turned red and the shaking finally stopped. Anthony Ferraro's words echoed in my mind. You'll hear from me soon. I'd lived in New York for 3 years, perfecting the art of being invisible. Working my shifts, paying my debts, keeping my head down, and my life small and safe. In one impulsive act of decency, I'd put myself on the radar of a man who commanded fear with just his presence. As I lay in bed, exhaustion pulling me under, I couldn't decide if I'd saved Luca Ferraro tonight, or if I'd been the one who needed saving all along. Tuesday morning started with the realization that I hadn't imagined any of it. The black sedan was still parked across from my building, same position it had held since I'd gotten home the night before. A different driver sat behind the wheel, but the message was identical. We're watching you. Brittany called before my alarm even went off. Please tell me you're alive. Alive and thoroughly creeped out, I said, peering through my window blinds at the car below. There's someone watching my apartment. Of course there is. She sounded exhausted, like she hadn't slept either. Kayla, I spent half the night researching Anthony Ferraro. The things this man is connected to. I don't want to know, I interrupted, because that felt safer somehow. Ignorance as protection. I helped his kid. That's it. This will blow over. Will it? Brittany's skepticism came through clearly. Because men like that don't just forget. She was right, but admitting that meant acknowledging I'd fundamentally changed my life in one impulsive moment. So instead, I promised to be careful and headed to work, hyper-aware of the sedan that followed at a discreet distance. Wednesday brought more of the same. The car changed, a dark blue SUV this time. But the surveillance remained constant. Other servers at Rossetti's started noticing the men who nursed single espressos for hours, always positioned where they could watch the entrance. Marco, our floor manager, pulled me aside during lunch rush. Kayla, is everything okay? Some of the staff are worried about the, increased attention on you. Translation. You're scaring customers and making everyone nervous. I couldn't exactly explain that I'd accidentally gotten involved with a crime family, so I mumbled something about an overprotective ex and promised it would resolve soon. I didn't believe that any more than he did. Thursday evening shattered any hope that Anthony Ferraro would simply move on with his life. I was taking orders at a corner booth when the entire restaurant went quiet. Not the natural lull between conversations, but the heavy silence that comes when something dangerous enters a space. Anthony Ferraro walked through the front door like he owned the building. Maybe he did. I wouldn't have been surprised to learn the Ferraro family had stakes in half the businesses in this neighborhood. He wore a navy suit today, crisp white shirt, no tie, the casual version of lethal elegance. And holding his hand, looking small and uncertain, was Luca. The child's eyes scanned the dining room until they found me, his entire face transformed, lighting up with recognition and relief. He tugged on his father's hand, pointing in my direction. Every eye in the restaurant tracked their movement toward my section. Miss Grant. Anthony's voice was perfectly polite, but beneath it ran currents I couldn't read. My son insisted on dining here tonight. He specifically requested you as our server. Luca nodded vigorously, and some of the tension in my shoulders eased. Whatever this was, at least the child seemed happy. Of course. Right this way. I grabbed menus and led them to a quiet table near the back, away from prying eyes. As I set down the menus, I couldn't help asking, "How are you feeling, Luca?" "Better than the other night." "Much better," he said softly, his voice carrying a slight accent I hadn't noticed during his panic. "Thank you for helping me. Papa says I should always thank people who are kind. Your papa's right." I smiled at him, then glanced at Anthony, who was watching this interaction with laser focus. "Can I start you with drinks?" "Water for both of us," Anthony said, "and perhaps a few minutes to look at the menu. Luca hasn't been here before. Take your time." I retreated to the server station, where Brittany immediately cornered me. "That's him. That's Anthony Ferraro. Kayla, he's here for you." "He's here to have dinner with his son," I corrected, though my hands shook as I filled water glasses. "Right. And I'm sure it's pure coincidence he chose this restaurant." Brittany gripped my arm. "Be careful. Men like that don't do anything without a reason." I delivered the water and took their orders. Chicken parmesan for Luca, grilled salmon for Anthony. Throughout the meal, I maintained professional distance, checking in at appropriate intervals without lingering. But I noticed things. The way Anthony cut Luca's chicken into smaller pieces without being asked. How Luca talked more freely as the meal progressed, telling his father about a book he'd read, a game he wanted to play. This wasn't the cold crime boss from the alley. This was a father making time for his child. When I brought dessert, tiramisu they'd agreed to share, Luca launched into an animated description of his insect collection. "I have 43 different species," he explained, using his fork to gesture. "My favorite is the Atlas beetle. They're huge and really strong. Did you know they can lift 850 times their own weight?" "I didn't know that," I said honestly. "That's incredible. Do you keep them at home?" "In my room. I have special habitats for each type." His enthusiasm was infectious, nothing like the terrified child from 3 nights ago. "Papa says maybe we can go to the Natural History Museum next week to see their insect exhibition." "That sounds wonderful." I glanced at Anthony, who had barely touched his tiramisu, too focused on his son's happiness. After they finished, I brought the check in a leather folder. Anthony didn't even glance at it before placing a credit card inside. While I processed the payment, I felt his attention on me, heavy and assessing. When I returned with the receipt, Anthony signed it with quick efficiency, then looked up at me directly. "Miss Grant, could you spare a moment after your shift? I'd like to speak with you privately." Every warning bell in my head went off. "I'm not sure that's—" "Please." He softened the word with something that might have been genuine request rather than command. "It's important. It concerns your safety. My safety." That phrasing ensured I couldn't refuse without seeming foolish. "I'm off in 40 minutes. We'll wait." They moved to the bar area, where Luca sipped juice, and Anthony made phone calls in low tones. I finished my closing duties with trembling hands, too aware of Brittany's worried glances. "I'm calling you in 1 hour," she insisted as we clocked out. "If you don't answer, I'm calling the police. It'll be fine." I lied. Anthony had arranged for privacy in Marco's office, a cramped space barely large enough for the desk and 2 chairs. Luca waited outside with 2 of Anthony's men, who'd materialized from wherever they'd been watching. "Thank you for agreeing to this," Anthony said once the door closed. He didn't sit, instead leaning against the desk in a posture that was probably meant to seem casual, but only emphasized his physical presence. "I wanted to thank you properly for what you did for Luca." "You already thanked me. And you don't need to." He held up a hand, stopping me. From his jacket pocket, he produced an envelope. $50,000. A gesture of gratitude. The number stole my breath. "I can't accept that." "Why not?" "Because I didn't help Luca for money." Frustration edged into my voice. "I helped him because he needed someone. You don't pay people for basic human decency." Anthony studied me like I was a puzzle he couldn't solve. "Most people in your situation would take the money without hesitation. I'm not most people." "No," he agreed slowly. "You're not." He tucked the envelope back into his jacket. "Very well. Let me propose an alternative. Here it comes," I thought. "Whatever he actually wants. Luca hasn't spoken to anyone outside our immediate family since his mother died 3 years ago," Anthony said quietly. "Not to teachers, therapists, or the various specialists I've hired. But tonight, he talked to you. About insects. About school. About things that matter to him." I remembered the child's animated face, so different from the terrified boy in the alley. "He seems like a sweet kid." "He is? And he's been lost since we buried his mother." Anthony's voice carried weight, grief that hadn't fully healed. "I'm offering you a job, Miss Grant. Legitimate employment as Luca's after-school tutor and companion. 4 afternoons per week, 3 hours each session. $7,000 per month." The amount made my head spin. That was more than I made working doubles 4 nights a week, enough to finally make real progress on the $70,000 in medical debt that haunted every financial decision I made. What would this job actually entail? I asked carefully. Spending time with Luca, taking him places, engaging his interests, providing the kind of normal childhood experiences he's been missing. "You wouldn't be responsible for academic tutoring. He has teachers for that. Just companionship, guidance, someone he feels safe with." It sounded too good to be true, which meant it probably was. And what's the catch? There's no catch. Mr. Ferraro. Anthony, he corrected. Anthony, I amended, the name feeling strange in my mouth. You're asking me to become involved in your son's life, which means becoming involved in yours. Given who you are, what you do, that's not a simple proposition. His expression didn't change, but I saw acknowledgement in his eyes. You've done your research. My friend did. She's very thorough when she's worried. Smart friend. He moved closer, not threatening, just closing the distance. I won't insult your intelligence by pretending I'm something I'm not. My business interests are complex and not always legal, but I keep that world separate from Luca. He lives in safety, surrounded by normal activities and appropriate boundaries. You would never be asked to participate in or witness anything connected to my other affairs. And if I say no, then you walk away, and I'll respect that decision. He paused. But I'm hoping you'll say yes. Not for the money, though I suspect you need it. For Luca. Because whatever you did in that alley connected with him in a way nothing else has for 3 years. I thought about my mother. Those final months when connection meant everything. When someone sitting beside her, present and patient, mattered more than any medicine. I thought about my mountain of debt, the exhaustion of constant work, the narrow life I'd carved out of necessity rather than choice. And I thought about a little boy who loved insects and needed someone to listen. I need to think about it, I said finally. This is a big decision. Of course. Take the time you need. Anthony pulled out a business card, plain white with just a phone number printed in black. Call this number when you've decided. Or if you need anything before then. I took the card, our fingers brushing briefly. Can I ask you something? You can ask. Why does my answer matter so much? You could hire any number of qualified professionals. I could, he agreed. But Luca didn't respond to any of them. He responded to you, and I've learned not to question what works when it comes to my son's well-being. That night, I sat in my tiny apartment with Brittany, the business card on the table between us like a loaded gun. $7,000 a month, she said for the 3rd time. Kayla, that's life-changing money. I know. You could pay off your mom's hospital debt in a year. Maybe less. I know. But you're still scared. Terrified, I admitted. Because accepting this means accepting everything that comes with it. The surveillance, the danger, the moral complexity of working for someone who runs a crime family, Brittany finished. Yeah, that's the part that should probably make you run in the opposite direction. Should, I echoed. But Luca is a sweet kid who deserves better than being used as emotional leverage. Her tone was gentle but firm. Anthony Ferraro might be a devoted father, but he's also a criminal who investigated you without permission and is using his son to manipulate you into his orbit. She wasn't wrong. Every logical part of my brain screamed that this was dangerous, foolish, a path toward complications I couldn't predict or control. But I kept seeing Luca's face when he talked about his beetles, the spark of life that had been missing in the alley. I'm going to say yes, I heard myself say. Not because of the money. Or not just because of the money, but because that kid needs someone, and for whatever reason, I'm someone he trusts. Brittany sighed. I was afraid you'd say that. You think I'm making a mistake. I think you're making a choice with consequences we can't predict. She squeezed my hand. But I also know you, and you've never been able to walk away from someone who needs help. Just promise me you'll be careful. And if things get weird or dangerous, I'll leave. I promised. I'm not sacrificing my safety or ethics for any amount of money. On Sunday afternoon, I called the number on Anthony's card. He answered on the 2nd ring. Miss Grant, I'll do it, I said before I could second-guess myself. I'll work with Luca. But I have conditions. I'm listening. Total transparency about expectations. Clear boundaries around what I will and won't be exposed to. And I want everything in writing. Employment contract, terms, all of it legal and documented. Agreed. He didn't hesitate. Can you start Monday? That soon? Luca has been asking about you every day since dinner. The sooner you begin, the better. Something in his voice, a thread of vulnerability beneath the confidence, made my next question easier. He really hasn't talked to anyone else? Not like he talks to you. A pause. Thank you, Miss Grant, for giving him this chance. Monday afternoon, a car arrived at my apartment exactly at 2 p.m. Not one of the surveillance vehicles, but a sleek town car with a professional driver who introduced himself as James. The drive to the Ferraro residence took 40 minutes, moving from my neighborhood of crowded buildings and narrow streets into an area where trees lined the roads and houses hid behind gates. The Ferraro home wasn't the gaudy mansion I'd half expected. It was a large brownstone, elegant and understated, with flower boxes in the windows and a small garden visible from the street. Wealth that didn't need to announce itself. Luca met me at the door, practically vibrating with excitement. You came. Papa said you would, but I wasn't sure. I promised, didn't I? I smiled at his enthusiasm. So, are you going to show me this famous insect collection? His face lit up completely. Yes. Come on, it's in my room. I added 2 new specimens this week. He grabbed my hand and pulled me through a house that was beautifully decorated, but felt oddly empty despite its size. We passed a formal living room, a dining area, a study with walls of books. Everything pristine and perfect and somehow lonely. Luca's room was different. Here was life and chaos and personality. Posters of insects covered the walls, careful habitats lined shelves, books spilled from every surface. He showed me each specimen with reverence, explaining their characteristics, habitats, behaviors. I sat on his floor and listened, asking questions, letting him teach me. And somewhere in that first hour, something settled inside me. Maybe this was the right decision. Maybe I could actually help this child who'd lost so much. When Anthony came home 2 hours later, he found us building a fort out of couch cushions and blankets, Luca laughing as we debated the structural integrity of our design. Anthony stood in the doorway, and the expression on his face made me understand why he'd been so insistent about hiring me. It wasn't manipulation or leverage. It was hope. Pure and simple and desperately needed. Having fun? He asked, his voice softer than I'd heard before. Papa, look. We made a fortress with observation towers for beetle defense. Luca gestured proudly at our creation. It's very impressive. Anthony's eyes met mine over his son's head. Thank you, he mouthed silently. I nodded, accepting the gratitude and everything it implied. This was just the beginning, I knew. Whatever I'd stepped into would become more complicated, more entwined with Anthony Ferraro's dangerous world. But watching Luca's pure joy, seeing a father's relief, I couldn't bring myself to regret the decision. Not yet, anyway. 3 weeks passed in a rhythm I hadn't expected to find comforting. Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday afternoons belonged to Luca. And despite my initial nervousness about working for Anthony Ferraro, the actual job felt remarkably normal. We'd spend hours talking about beetles and spiders, building elaborate habitats, or reading books about entomology that Luca had accumulated in alarming quantities. But normal only stretched so far when armed men followed us everywhere. I want to take Luca to the Natural History Museum, I told Anthony one evening as he returned home early, something that was happening with increasing frequency. They have an insect exhibition he's been talking about nonstop. Anthony's jaw tightened. Public spaces are complicated. He's 8 years old. He needs experiences beyond this house. I kept my voice level, but firm. You hired me to give him normalcy. That means actually going places where normal kids go. He studied me for a long moment, and I could see the war playing out behind his eyes. Father versus crime boss, safety versus childhood, protection versus prison, discreet security, he finally said. They'll maintain distance, but they'll be present, as long as Luca doesn't notice them. He won't. True to Anthony's word, when we visited the museum that Saturday, I spotted the security immediately. 2 men in casual clothes who never quite looked at the exhibits, always positioning themselves with clear sightlines. But Luca remained oblivious, too absorbed in displays of giant beetles and preserved butterfly collections to notice his shadows. We stood in front of an Atlas beetle specimen, Luca practically vibrating with excitement. Look at those horns. In the wild, males use them to fight for territory and mates. They can flip other beetles right over. They're impressive, I agreed, watching his face light up in a way that still felt miraculous after weeks of witnessing his transformation. Do you think you'd ever want to see them in their natural habitat? Southeast Asia, right? Papa says maybe when I'm older. His expression dimmed slightly. Mama always wanted to travel more. She had this list of places. But then, he stopped, the sentence hanging unfinished. We moved to a quieter corner near the aquatic insects display. Luca sat on a bench, suddenly smaller than his 8 years. My mom had lists too, I said softly, sitting beside him. Things she wanted to do after she got better. Places to visit, recipes to try, grandchildren she wanted to meet someday. I swallowed past the tightness in my throat. She had cancer. Fought it for 2 years before she died 6 months ago. Luca looked up at me, recognition in his eyes. Not pity, but understanding. Does it still hurt? Missing her? Every day. But it's different now. In the beginning, the pain was so big I couldn't see around it. Now it's more like I searched for words an 8-year-old would grasp. Like a stone in my pocket, always there, always heavy. But I've learned to carry it. Mama died in a car accident. His voice dropped to barely a whisper. I was there, in the back seat. The other car ran a red light and hit us on her side. His hands clenched in his lap. I kept calling for her, but she didn't answer. There was so much blood, and the sirens were loud. And Papa came, but he couldn't. His breath hitched. He couldn't fix it. Without thinking, I wrapped my arm around his shoulders. He leaned into me, not crying, just existing in the space where grief lived alongside memory. Your Papa couldn't fix it because some things can't be fixed, I said quietly. But he's still here. And he loves you more than anything in the world. I know. Luca wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. Sometimes I'm scared I'll forget what she looked like. Her real face, not just in pictures. That's normal. I worry about that too with my mom. I squeezed his shoulder gently. But you know what helps? Remembering the small things. The way she laughed, or how she said your name, or what she smelled like. Those memories stick around longer than faces sometimes. We sat there for a while. 2 people carrying stones, finding unexpected comfort in shared weight. When I brought Luca home that afternoon, Anthony met us at the door. He took one look at his son's face, peaceful but tired, and his eyes found mine with a question. We had a good talk, I said simply, about important things. Later that week, Anthony started coming home earlier, not just in time for dinner but before, while Luca and I were still in the middle of our activities. He'd loosen his tie, shed his jacket, and join us on the floor where we'd be building or reading or playing elaborate games involving insect warfare. Those evenings shifted into dinner together. The 3 of us at the large dining table that suddenly felt less empty. Luca would dominate conversation, but afterward, while he watched television or played in his room, Anthony and I found ourselves talking. Real conversations, not the careful small talk of employer and employee. He asked about my mother, about the years of treatment, about what it felt like watching someone you love fade incrementally. I asked about his wife, about their marriage, about navigating single parenthood while running an empire built on shadows. Gianna was arranged, he admitted one evening over coffee. Our families had connections, mutual interests. We married when I was 24, and she was 22, both of us fulfilling obligations. That sounds transactional? He smiled without humor. It was, for about 6 months. Then I actually saw her. Not the role she played or the alliance she represented, but her. The way she laughed at terrible jokes, how she cried during sad movies, her stubborn insistence on learning to cook despite burning everything. His voice softened. We fell in love despite the arrangement. Maybe because of it. No pretense, no games. Just 2 people trapped in the same life deciding to make it bearable together. She sounds wonderful. She was. And I failed her. The words came out flat, heavy with old guilt. I should have protected her better. Should have had more security. Should have predicted the future. I interrupted gently. Should have known a driver would run a red light at that exact moment. Anthony, you can't control everything, no matter how much power you have. His dark eyes met mine, and something cracked in his expression. I've spent 3 years trying to accept that. Most days I still can't. I maintained my shifts at Rossetti's 3 evenings a week. needing the connection to life outside the Ferraro bubble. Brittany would corner me during breaks, demanding updates with the intensity of someone watching a friend walk a tightrope. "You're falling for him," she said one night, accusation and concern mixed in equal measure. "I'm not. Kayla. I've known you for 3 years. You get this look when you talk about him, about their dinners together, about the conversations." She gripped my arm. "He's a crime boss. A actual, literal criminal. You can't just forget that because he's a good father and has sad eyes. I know what he is." But even as I said it, I wondered if I really did. The Anthony I saw with Luca, the one who came home early just to spend time with his son, who listened when I talked about my mother, who looked at me sometimes like I was solving puzzles he didn't know existed, that Anthony didn't match the monster Brittany's research had painted. "Just be careful," she pleaded. "Please, because I don't think you can walk away from this without getting hurt." The art studio revelation came on a Thursday night, 3 weeks and 4 days after I'd started working for Anthony. Luca had fallen asleep early, exhausted from a day at the botanical gardens. I'd been gathering my things to leave when Anthony appeared in the hallway. "Can I show you something?" His voice carried an uncertainty I'd never heard before. I followed him upstairs to a locked door I'd passed dozens of times without questioning. He produced a key from his pocket, fingers trembling slightly as he unlocked it. The room beyond was flooded with late evening light from large windows. Canvases covered the walls and stood propped against every surface. Paintings in various stages of completion. Landscapes, portraits, abstract pieces bursting with color. Paints and brushes remained arranged on a work table, waiting for an artist who would never return. "This was Gianna's," Anthony said, his voice thick. "Her studio. I haven't let anyone in here since—" He stopped, composing himself. "Since the funeral." I moved carefully through the space, examining paintings that revealed a talented hand and vibrant imagination. A portrait of young Luca, maybe 5 years old, caught my attention. The love in every brushstroke was palpable. She was gifted. She was everything. Anthony stood in the center of the room, looking lost. We met at an art gallery in Milan. She was there studying Renaissance techniques. I was there for a business meeting that happened to be held in the same building. She literally ran into me coming around a corner, spilled her coffee all over my suit. Despite the grief permeating the room, he smiled at the memory. The marriage was arranged 3 months later, but I'd already decided I wanted her. Spent those months figuring out how to make her want me back. He touched the edge of a canvas gently. She painted our entire courtship. Every date, every conversation, every moment that mattered. These walls are our history. I understood then what being invited here meant. This wasn't just a studio. It was a shrine, a testament, a place where grief lived in concentrated form. I should have protected her better, he said again, the guilt ever present. Should have known that car was stolen. Should have had better intelligence on threats in that area. Should have... Anthony. I moved closer, drawn by the rawness in his voice. You're not omnipotent. You're just a man who lost someone he loved. You're allowed to have failed at the impossible. His eyes found mine, and the vulnerability there made my chest ache. I don't know how to stop feeling responsible. Maybe you don't. Maybe that guilt becomes another stone you carry. And I thought of Luca on the museum bench, of my own grief still fresh and heavy. But you can't let it crush you. Luca needs you present, not drowning in what-ifs. We stood there, surrounded by a dead woman's dreams, and something shifted between us. Some acknowledgement that we'd both been touched by loss. Both carried weight we couldn't put down. My hand found his where it rested on a table edge. Just contact. Just connection. He didn't pull away. His fingers curled around mine, warm and solid and alive. Minutes passed. The light faded further, casting the studio in blue shadows. Our hands remained joined, that single point of contact somehow meaning more than words could convey. Kayla. My name and his voice sounded different. Careful. Weighted with things neither of us could say. I should go, I whispered, but didn't move. You should. He didn't move either. The tension stretched taut between us, awareness crackling in the quiet space. I became hyper-conscious of everything. His thumb tracing small circles on my hand, the way his breathing had changed. how close we were standing, the heat radiating from his body. This was dangerous, crossing lines that should remain firm, blurring boundaries that kept everything simple and professional. I pulled my hand back reluctantly. "Thank you for showing me this, for trusting me with it." Anthony nodded, the spell breaking. "Thank you for listening, for understanding." He stepped back, creating necessary distance. "I'll have James take you home." On the drive back to my apartment, I stared out the window and tried to process what had happened, the intimacy of that moment, the vulnerability we'd both shown, the connection that went far beyond employer and employee. Brittany's warnings echoed in my mind. I was getting too close, feeling too much, forgetting what Anthony Ferraro actually was beneath the grief and fatherhood. But as I lay in bed that night, unable to sleep, all I could think about was his hand in mine, and how right it had felt despite everything that made it wrong. The changes in Luca over the following weeks bordered on miraculous. He returned to school for the first time since his mother's death, initially nervous but growing more confident with each passing day. His teacher called Anthony after the first week, amazed at how engaged Luca had become during class discussions. He made his first friend, a quiet boy named Michael, who shared his passion for insects, and they spent recess trading facts about different species. Most remarkably, the nightmares stopped. Anthony mentioned it one evening as we cleaned up after dinner, his voice thick with emotion. He slept through the night, all night. That hasn't happened in 3 years. He's healing, I said simply. Kids are resilient when they feel safe. But as Luca flourished, I found myself stretched impossibly thin. Working with him 4 afternoons a week while maintaining 3 evening shifts at Rossetti's meant I barely slept, surviving on caffeine and determination. The exhaustion was catching up with me, showing in shadows under my eyes, and the way my hands trembled when I poured coffee. Brittany cornered me during a particularly brutal Friday night rush. "You look like death. When was the last time you slept more than 5 hours?" "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You're working yourself into the ground." She grabbed my arm, forcing me to meet her eyes. "Kayla, you need to choose. The restaurant or the Ferraro family. You can't sustain both." She was right. I knew she was right. But leaving Rossetti's meant relying completely on Anthony for income, surrendering the independence I'd fought so hard to maintain. That Sunday, I made my decision. Anthony was in his study when I arrived, reading through documents that he smoothly turned face down when I knocked. "Kayla, is everything all right? You're not scheduled today. I need to talk to you about my schedule." I sat in the chair across from his desk, hands clasped to hide their shaking. "I'm going to leave my position at Rossetti's. The double schedule is becoming unsustainable, and Luca deserves better than someone who's half asleep during our time together." He studied me carefully. "This is a significant decision. You've worked there for 3 years." "I know, but I can't do both anymore, not well." I took a breath, which brings me to my request. If I'm committing to this job full-time, I need the salary to reflect that reality, to cover what I'm losing from the restaurant and allow me to continue paying down my debts. What would you need? I'd calculated the numbers a dozen times, trying to find a figure that was fair without being excessive. 10,000 a month. Anthony didn't hesitate. "Done. Just like that? Kayla, you've given my son his life back. You've done more in 6 weeks than specialists accomplished in 3 years. Whatever you need to continue doing that, it's yours." He pulled out a contract from his desk drawer, already prepared. I had my lawyer draw this up last week, anticipating this conversation. 10,000 monthly, health insurance included, all taxes properly documented, everything legal and above board. I took the document, scanning terms that were more than generous. "You knew I'd have to quit? I knew you couldn't maintain both indefinitely. And selfishly, I wanted you to choose us." His gaze held mine. "Was that wrong?" "No," I admitted. It was practical. I signed the contract and felt something shift inside me. For the first time since my mother's diagnosis, since those crushing hospital bills had started accumulating, I could breathe. "Thank you. For this. For understanding. For..." My voice cracked. "For the first time in years, I don't feel like I'm drowning financially." Anthony came around the desk, taking my hands in his. "You shouldn't have had to carry that burden alone. I'm glad I can help lighten it now. The contact lingered longer than necessary, his thumbs brushing across my knuckles in a gesture that felt deliberate. We stood there, awareness crackling between us, before he released me and stepped back. Congratulations on your new position, Miss Grant. Thank you, Mr. Ferraro. Brittany insisted on throwing me a farewell dinner at my apartment the following Friday. She cooked pasta, opened wine, and spent the evening alternating between celebration and interrogation. So, you're all in now, she said, pouring us both another glass. Completely dependent on Anthony Ferraro for your livelihood. It's a legitimate job with a legitimate contract. That's not what I'm worried about. She settled onto my couch, fixing me with the look that meant she was about to say something I didn't want to hear. You're in love with him. I'm not. Kayla, I've known you for 3 years. I watched you date that accountant from Queens, that bartender from the East Village, even that musician who couldn't hold down a job. You never looked at any of them the way you look when you talk about Anthony. She leaned forward. You light up. Your whole face changes. And I'm terrified because falling in love with a crime boss is about the worst decision you could possibly make. I wanted to deny it, to insist she was wrong. But sitting there in my small apartment with my best friend, who'd never been anything but honest with me, I couldn't lie. I don't know what I feel, I said quietly, but it's not simple. It's not just about him. It's about Luca, too. About this family I've somehow become part of. About feeling useful and needed and wanted, Brittany supplied gently. Yes, wanted. I swallowed hard, but I'm also terrified. Because you're right about what he is, what he does. And I don't know how to reconcile caring about someone whose hands are stained with things I can't even imagine. Then maybe you need to decide if you can live with not knowing, she said, because that's what this is going to be. Loving the parts of him he shows you while ignoring the parts he doesn't. The school recital happened 3 days later. Luca had been preparing for weeks, his ocean conservation project dominating our afternoon sessions. He'd built an elaborate diorama showing marine ecosystems, complete with hand-painted species and detailed research notes. Anthony and I sat in the auditorium among other parents, watching children present their work. When Luca's turn came, he walked confidently to the front. But I saw the moment nerves hit. His hands trembled as he positioned his diorama, his voice wavering on the first few words. Anthony's hand found mine automatically, fingers threading through mine in a grip that revealed his own anxiety. I squeezed back, offering silent support. Luca found his rhythm, his passion for the subject overcoming fear. He spoke eloquently about coral reefs and ocean acidification, about endangered species and conservation efforts. Pride radiated from every word, every gesture. And through it all, Anthony held my hand, even after Luca settled. Even when the presentation ended to enthusiastic applause, he didn't let go. We sat there in the dimly lit auditorium, hands joined in full view of other parents, claiming something we hadn't acknowledged aloud. Neither of us mentioned it afterward. Not in the car ride home, not during dinner, not when Luca went to bed early, exhausted from his big day, but the awareness remained, humming beneath every interaction. The small moments accumulated like drops of water eventually carving stone. Anthony teaching me about Italian wine one evening, our fingers brushing as he handed me a glass, the contact sending electricity up my arm. Me straightening his tie before an important meeting, my hands lingering on the silk, feeling his pulse quicken under my touch. Glances held too long across the dinner table, conversations that meant more than their surface words suggested. We circled each other like planets locked in gravity's pull, unable to collide, but impossible to separate. The turning point came on a Thursday evening. Luca had been unusually quiet during dinner, pushing food around his plate instead of eating. "What's on your mind, buddy?" I asked. He looked between Anthony and me, then asked with the devastating honesty of children, "Can Kayla be my new mom?" The silence that followed was deafening. Anthony went completely still, his wine glass frozen halfway to his lips. I felt heat flood my face, mortification, and something else. Something dangerously close to hope. "Luca," Anthony started, but the boy interrupted. "I know she's not actually my mom, and I know Mama can't come back. But Kayla is here, and she cares about me. And she makes you happy too, Papa. I see it. His eyes, so much like his father's, held surprising maturity. I just want us to be a real family. It wasn't about paperwork or last names. It was a child asking if the adults in his life would finally choose him and mean it. Anthony set down his glass carefully. Come here, son. Luca climbed into his father's lap, and I watched Anthony gather his thoughts, choosing words with visible care. There are different kinds of families, Anthony said gently. Some are born, connected by blood. Others are chosen, connected by love and respect. What we have here, the three of us, is already a family. Maybe not in the traditional way, but family nonetheless. But is Kayla going to stay? Luca's voice was small, afraid. Or will she leave like everyone else? My throat tightened. I'm not going anywhere, Luca. I promise. But what about when I'm older? What about when... He struggled with the concept. What about always? I looked at Anthony, finding his gaze already on me. The question hung between us, unspoken but deafening. What about always? How about we take things one day at a time? I suggested softly. Some promises are too big to make all at once, but I can promise that today, tomorrow, and every day after that, I can see I'm choosing to be here with you. It satisfied him, or at least gave him enough reassurance to finish dinner and head to bed. After he was asleep, Anthony found me in the garden, where I'd escaped to process the conversation's weight. I'm sorry about that, he said, joining me on the stone bench. Children don't understand boundaries. He's not wrong, though. The words escaped before I could stop them. About what's developing here, between us. Anthony turned to face me fully. Kayla, I know this is complicated. I know you're still grieving Gianna. I know your world is dangerous, and I'm probably insane for even considering. I stopped, frustrated with my own rambling, but I can't pretend anymore. I can't pretend I don't feel something when you look at me. When you hold my hand, when you talk about your life, and let me see the person beneath the reputation. I've been avoiding this, Anthony admitted quietly. Avoiding you. Avoiding these feelings. Out of respect for Gianna's memory. Yes, but also to protect you. My world isn't safe, Kayla. Caring about me puts you at risk. I'm already at risk. I became part of your world the moment I sat down with Luca in that alley. This is different. This is... He reached out, cupping my face with one hand. This is me admitting that I'm falling for you despite every reason I shouldn't. That watching you with my son makes me feel things I thought died with my wife. That you've become essential to my life in ways that terrify me. My breath caught. Anthony. But I'm also a realist. You need to understand what you'd be accepting. Not just my feelings, but everything that comes with them. The danger, the moral compromises, the life I lead outside these walls. I know what you are, I said. I've known from the beginning. And I'm terrified of what that means. Of loving someone who does the things you do. But I'm more terrified of walking away from something real because it's complicated. His thumb traced my cheekbone, the touch reverent. You deserve better than me. Maybe. But I want you anyway. The kiss happened without conscious decision, our mouths meeting in the moonlit garden. It was gentle, tentative, nothing like the passionate embraces from movies. Just two broken people finding unexpected comfort and connection, testing boundaries, discovering possibility. When we pulled apart, Anthony rested his forehead against mine. This changes everything. I know. We can't go back to pretending. I don't want to. We sat there in the darkness, holding each other, and I understood that I'd just crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Whatever came next, whether joy or heartbreak or something in between, I'd chosen this path with full awareness. 6 weeks passed in a careful dance of new boundaries and old cautions. Anthony and I navigated our evolving relationship with the delicacy of people handling something precious and potentially explosive. We established rules, spoken and unspoken, designed to protect what we were building. I need boundaries, I told him one evening after Luca had gone to bed. We sat in his study, the space that had become our haven for difficult conversations. Clear lines I won't cross. Tell me what you need. I don't want involvement in your business. Not the illegal parts, not the dangerous parts. I don't want to know details, don't want to witness anything that would make me complicit. I met his gaze directly. And if you ever cross a line I can't accept, if you hurt innocent people or do something that violates my core values, I reserve the right to leave. No matter how I feel about you. Anthony nodded slowly. Those are fair terms. I can keep that world separate from you. Can you? Really? I pressed. Because eventually, something will bleed through. That's the nature of what you do. Then I'll handle it when it happens. But I won't let you be exposed to violence or criminality. You have my word. For 6 weeks, he kept that promise. Life settled into a rhythm that felt almost normal. Mornings with Luca before school. Afternoons exploring museums or parks or simply reading in the garden. Evenings with Anthony joining us for dinner. The three of us talking and laughing like families do. Nights where Anthony and I would steal moments alone. Kisses in darkened hallways. Conversations that stretched into early morning hours. But normal was an illusion in Anthony Ferraro's world. And illusions always shatter eventually. The first crack appeared when I noticed Anthony's tension increasing. Phone calls at odd hours. Meetings that kept him away longer. Security that became more visible rather than discreet. He tried to hide it, but I'd learned to read the tightness around his eyes, the way his jaw clenched when problems pressed. What's wrong? I asked one night, finding him in his study long after midnight, staring at documents spread across his desk. Business complications. Nothing for you to worry about. Anthony, I'm handling it, Kayla. His tone was sharper than usual, stress bleeding through his control. Then he softened, reaching for my hand. I'm sorry. You're right to ask. There's territorial conflict escalating, rival interests pushing into areas that have been stable for years. It's manageable, but it requires attention. Dangerous attention? All attention in my world carries risk, but I've dealt with worse. I wanted to press, to demand more information, but our agreement echoed in my mind. Don't ask about the business. Don't cross that line. So I squeezed his hand and let it go, trusting him to keep his violent world separate from the life we were building. That trust proved misplaced. 3 days later, I arrived at the house to find Anthony in his study with 4 men I'd never seen before. The door was partially open, their voices carrying into the hallway, where I stood frozen with Luca beside me. The O'Sullivans hit 3 of our dock operations last night. One man said, his tone grim. They're not negotiating, Anthony. They want war. Then we give them war. Anthony's voice was cold, devoid of the warmth I'd come to associate with him. Hit them back twice as hard. Their warehouse on the waterfront, their distribution center in Queens. I want them to understand that every action has consequences. What about civilians? The warehouse has legitimate workers during day shifts. Schedule it for night. I'm not interested in unnecessary casualties, but I'm also not interested in showing weakness. The O'Sullivans need to remember why they avoided conflict with us for the past decade. I felt Luca stiffen beside me, his small hand gripping mine with painful intensity. When I looked down, his face had gone white, eyes wide with the kind of terror I'd only seen once before in a rain-soaked alley. Luca, I whispered, but he pulled away from me, backing toward the stairs. I need to go to my room, he said, voice shaking. I can't. He ran before I could stop him, footsteps pounding up the staircase. I stood torn between following him and confronting Anthony, before choosing the child who needed me more. I found Luca curled on his bed, shaking violently. When I sat beside him, he flinched away. It's happening again, he whispered. The violence. Papa is planning to hurt people, and someone will get hurt back, and... His breathing came too fast. Panic attack threatening. Mama died because of his business. The man who hit our car? He was trying to hurt Papa, but got her instead. And now it's starting again, and you'll die too, and I can't. Luca, breathe with me. I kept my voice steady despite my own racing heart. In for 4. Hold for 4. Out for 4. Come on. Do it with me. We breathed together until his panic subsided to manageable fear. Then I held him while he cried, processing revelations I hadn't known. Gianna's death hadn't been random accident. It had been collateral damage in Anthony's war. When Anthony found us an hour later, Luca was asleep, exhausted from emotion. I extracted myself carefully and followed Anthony into the hallway, closing the bedroom door behind me. "He heard," Anthony said flatly, not a question. "He heard you planning violence. He's terrified it's going to happen again, that someone else he loves will die because of your business." Anthony's face showed the first real crack in his composure I'd witnessed. I never wanted him to know that part of my life. I've tried so hard to keep him separate. You can't keep it separate when you're planning retaliatory strikes in your home office with the door open. Anger edged into my voice. "You promised me boundaries, Anthony. You promised this world wouldn't touch us. And I've kept that promise. You weren't supposed to overhear that conversation. Luca wasn't supposed to." He stopped, running a hand through his hair. "The O'Sullivans are forcing my hand. If I don't respond, they'll see weakness and escalate. More people will die if I show restraint now. So you're choosing violence as the solution. I'm choosing survival, protection. Everything I do is to keep my family safe." "Your family," I repeated. "The same family that just listened to you plan attacks that could kill people? The same son who's now terrified you're going to die like his mother did?" The next morning, everything fell apart. I arrived at the house at my usual time to find it in chaos. Anthony was shouting orders into his phone, men I recognized as his security team moving with urgent purpose through the rooms. "What's happening?" I grabbed Anthony's arm as he passed. "Luca's missing. He didn't arrive at school this morning. The security team thought there was a driver change, but..." His voice cracked. "Someone has him, Kayla. The O'Sullivans have my son." Ice flooded my veins. "Are you sure? Did they make demands?" "Not yet, but it's the only explanation. He left with someone claiming to be a new driver, got in a car that wasn't ours, and vanished." Anthony looked destroyed, fear replacing his usual control. "I should have increased security. Should have seen this coming. Should have..." "Anthony, stop!" My mind raced, processing. "You said he got in a car willingly? Told security there was a driver change?" "Yes. Why does that?" "Because Luca is 8 years old and terrified. What if he wasn't taken? What if he ran?" Anthony stared at me. "Ran where? He's a child. A child who overheard you planning violence yesterday. A child who's convinced that violence killed his mother and will kill everyone else he loves." I grabbed my phone. "He wouldn't go home. He wouldn't go anywhere obvious. He'd go somewhere he feels safe. Somewhere connected to good memories rather than fear." "Where?" I closed my eyes, thinking through all our afternoons together, all the places that had made Luca light up. The public library, the main branch where we used to spend hours in the children's section. He loved it there, said it felt peaceful. That's 15 minutes from his school. You think he'd go there alone? I think he's your son, which means he's smart and resourceful when he's scared. And I think he deliberately fooled your security because he needed to escape." Anthony was already moving, shouting orders to mobilize teams to the library. "If you're wrong, I'm not wrong. I know him, Anthony. Trust me." The drive felt eternal despite taking less than 20 minutes. Anthony sat rigid beside me, making call after call, coordinating his people. When we arrived, he wanted to storm in with his entire security team, but I stopped him. "Let me go first. If he's there, he's scared and hiding. A dozen armed men will terrify him more. Kayla, trust me," I repeated. The library was busy with afternoon patrons, oblivious to the drama unfolding. I moved through the main floor to the children's section in the back, scanning between shelves and reading nooks. At first, I saw nothing. Then I noticed a small shoe visible beneath a table in the furthest corner, behind a display of picture books. "Luca," I kept my voice soft, non-threatening. "It's me. It's Kayla." A muffled sound, something between a sob and a gasp. I crouched down, peering under the table. Luca was there, knees pulled to his chest, face buried against his arms. He looked up at my voice, and the relief that flooded his features broke my heart. "I ran away," he whispered. "I tricked Marco. I told him Papa changed drivers and I got in a taxi and came here. I know I'm in trouble, but I couldn't. You're not in trouble. You're safe. And that's all that matters." I extended my hand. "But your Papa is very worried. Can you come out and talk to him? Is he mad? He's scared. There's a difference." Luca crawled out from under the table and threw himself into my arms. I held him tightly, feeling him tremble. I heard what he said yesterday. About hitting back, about hurting the O'Sullivans, and I remembered Mama, and the blood, and his voice broke. I don't want anyone else to die because of Papa's business. I know, sweetheart, I know. Anthony appeared in the aisle, and the expression on his face was raw devastation. He dropped to his knees, opening his arms, and Luca ran to him. I'm sorry, Papa. I'm sorry, I just got so scared and I didn't know what else to do. No, I'm sorry. I'm the one who failed you. Anthony held his son like he might disappear. I should have been more careful. Should have protected you from that conversation. Should have explained things instead of hiding them. I said quietly. Luca deserves to understand his father's world, at least the parts that affect him. Age-appropriate truth is better than fear-filled imagination. We left the library together, Luca between us, holding both our hands. Back at the house, Anthony dismissed his security team except for 2 posted outside. Then the 3 of us sat in the living room, and Anthony did something I suspected he'd never done before. He told his son the truth. My business isn't always legal, Anthony said carefully. I make money through methods that sometimes break laws. And yes, that means I'm connected to dangerous people and dangerous situations. Your mother died because someone wanted to hurt me, and she was in the wrong place. That's my burden to carry, Luca. My guilt and my responsibility. Then why don't you stop? Luca asked, tears streaming down his face. Why keep doing it if it's dangerous? Because it's not that simple. The people who work for me, the families who depend on my organization for their livelihoods, they need stability and protection. If I walk away, someone worse takes over. Someone who doesn't have rules, who doesn't care about innocent people. Anthony's voice was heavy. I'm not a good man, son. But I try to be a man with honor. I try to minimize harm and protect the people in my care, including me and Kayla. Especially you and Kayla. Everything I do to keep you safe. Even when it means planning to hurt other people? Anthony flinched at the direct question. Sometimes, yes. When someone threatens my family, I respond. But I have rules, Luca. I don't hurt innocent people. I don't target families. I keep my conflicts within my world, away from civilians. It wasn't enough to erase the fear or make everything okay. But it was honest, which mattered more than comfort. After Luca went to bed that night, Anthony found me in the garden. He could have been killed today. Running away alone, anything could have happened. But it didn't. He's safe, because of you. You understood him better than I did. Knew where he'd go, how he'd think. Anthony sat beside me. But this can't continue. Having you and Luca close to me, it puts you both at risk. The O'Sullivans are escalating, and if they figure out how much you mean to me, stop. I turned to face him. If you're about to suggest I leave for my own safety, don't. I'm not walking away from Luca when he needs stability. And I'm not walking away from you because things got complicated. Kayla, you don't understand what these people are capable of. Then increase security. Take precautions. But don't push me away thinking that's protection, because abandoning Luca now would cause more damage than any external threat. I took his hands. I'm proposing the opposite. Let me move in here temporarily. That way I'm not commuting, not exposed during travel. I'm here with Luca, providing the constant presence he needs. You want to move into my home in the middle of a territorial war. I want to be where I can help the people I care about. I met his gaze steadily. I'm not naive, Anthony. I know this is dangerous, but I'd rather face danger with you than safety without you. He studied me for a long moment. You're sure about this? Once you're here, once you're seen as part of my household, there's no going back to anonymous safety. I stopped being anonymous the night I helped Luca. Everything since then has been borrowed time. I squeezed his hands. I'm sure. Then we do this right. Enhanced security, reinforced protocols, and you follow every safety instruction without question. Agreed. 3 days later, I moved into the Ferraro house with a suitcase of clothes and the understanding that I'd just crossed a line I could never uncross. I was no longer Kayla Grant, independent woman carefully keeping distance from dangerous entanglements. I was Kayla Grant, the woman living under Anthony Ferraro's roof during a gang war. Protected, yes, but also marked, claimed, irrevocably part of a world I'd once sworn to avoid. And despite every logical reason to be terrified, I'd never felt more certain about where I belonged. Living in Anthony Ferraro's house transformed everything in ways I hadn't anticipated. The professional boundaries that had kept us safe blurred under the weight of domestic intimacy. Small moments accumulated into something larger, more significant, impossible to ignore. Mornings became my favorite time. I'd wake to find Luca already in the kitchen, attempting to make breakfast with varying degrees of success. Anthony would join us still half asleep, hair mussed, tie not yet straightened, looking more human than the polished crime boss the world saw. We'd eat together, the three of us crowded around the island instead of the formal dining table, talking about nothing and everything. One Tuesday morning, I couldn't reach the coffee mugs on the top shelf. Before I could grab a step stool, Anthony appeared behind me, his body close as he retrieved the cup. His hand lingered at my waist, thumb tracing small circles through the thin fabric of my shirt. The contact lasted seconds too long to be casual, charged with awareness we both felt, but hadn't fully acknowledged. "Thank you," I managed, my voice steadier than I felt. Anytime. His breath was warm against my ear, and when he stepped back, the space between us felt deliberately maintained. Luca remained oblivious to the tension, chattering about a field trip to the planetarium. But I saw Anthony's eyes track me as I moved through the kitchen. Heat and want, and something deeper, more complicated. Evening brought different intimacy. The three of us would pile onto the oversized couch in the den, Luca wedged between us, watching movies until his eyes drooped. One night, he fell asleep during an animated film about ocean creatures, his head on my shoulder, feet stretched across Anthony's lap. We sat there long after the credits rolled, neither of us willing to break the moment. "He's comfortable with you," Anthony said quietly. "More than I've seen him with anyone except family. He's a special kid. You're good for him. For both of us." His hand found mine in the space between us, fingers interlacing. "I don't want to think about what our life would look like without you in it." The admission hung in the darkened room, heavy with implications neither of us was quite ready to explore fully. Brittany visited on a Saturday afternoon, her first time seeing me in the Ferraro house. I gave her a tour, watching her take in the elegant furnishings, the art on the walls, the security cameras discreetly placed in every corner. We ended up in the garden, far from listening ears. "You look happy," she said, but worry shadowed her expression. "Happier than I've seen you since before your mom got sick." "I am happy. Is that wrong?" "It's complicated." She sat on the stone bench, pulling me down beside her. "Kayla, from the outside looking in, you three look like a real family. The way Anthony looks at you, how Luca gravitates toward you, the ease you all have together. It's beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. Why terrifying? Because this isn't sustainable. Eventually, Anthony's world is going to intrude in ways you can't ignore or compartmentalize. And when that happens, you'll have to make a choice about whether you can live with the full reality of who he is." She gripped my hand. "I just need to know you're prepared for that. That you're not getting swept up in the fantasy of playing house with a dangerous man. I'm not naive, Britt. I know what he is." "Do you? Really? Or do you just know the version of him that exists in this house with his son?" I wanted to argue, to insist I understood completely, but the truth was, I'd been carefully avoiding thinking too deeply about Anthony's other life. The business he conducted behind closed doors, the violence implied in vague references to handling situations, the men who came and went with weapons poorly concealed under expensive suits. "I'm choosing to trust him," I said finally, "to believe he can keep that world separate from this one. And if he can't, then I'll deal with it when it happens." Brittany looked like she wanted to say more, but Luca appeared at the garden door, calling me to see something he'd found in his insect habitat. The conversation ended, but her warnings echoed in my mind long after she left. The security room revelation happened by accident 3 days later. I was looking for Anthony to ask about dinner plans, opening doors in the wing of the house I rarely visited. Most rooms were guest quarters or storage, but one door at the end of the hall opened to reveal something entirely different. Banks of monitors covered one wall, displaying feeds from dozens of cameras. Maps of New York spread across a large table, marked with colored pins and annotations I couldn't fully decipher. File cabinets lined another wall, and on the far side of the room, a locked cabinet that I strongly suspected contained weapons. This wasn't a home office. This was a command center. You weren't supposed to see this. Anthony's voice came from behind me, and I spun to find him in the doorway, expression unreadable. What is all this? Exactly what it looks like. The infrastructure that keeps my organization running. He moved into the room, not trying to hide anything now that I'd found it. These monitors show our warehouse locations, import docks, meeting sites. The maps track territory, both ours and rival families. The files contain intelligence on everyone from corrupt politicians to rival organization members. I stared at the evidence of his empire, unable to process the scale. You run all of this from your house, where your son lives? It's secure, protected. And yes, I keep my work close because trusting others with certain information gets people killed. He gestured to the weapons cabinet. That contains backup armaments in case we're ever under direct attack here. Which, until recently with the O'Sullivan situation, was an unlikely scenario. Anthony, this is... I struggled for words. This is so much bigger than I imagined. The reach, the organization, the level of... criminality? He supplied. I told you what I was, Kayla. I never pretended to be something else. You told me in abstract terms. This is concrete reality. I pointed at the monitors. How many of these operations are illegal? How many people work for you doing things that could put them in prison? Most of them. And approximately 200 people rely on my organization for their income. The number staggered me. 200 families connected to Anthony's criminal enterprise. 200 people whose livelihoods depended on imported goods that probably bypassed customs, on protection rackets, on all the shadowy business I deliberately avoided learning about. Show me everything, I said suddenly. No more carefully edited versions. No more protecting me from the uncomfortable truths. If I'm living here, if I'm part of your life, I need to know exactly what that means. Anthony studied me for a long moment. Are you sure? Because once you know, you can't unknow it. I'm sure. What followed was the most uncomfortable hour of my life. Anthony walked me through his operations with clinical detail. Import businesses that moved legitimate goods alongside contraband. Relationships with union leaders and port authorities that involved regular payoffs. Protection services offered to businesses in Ferraro territory, which amounted to sophisticated extortion. Enforcement actions against people who violated agreements or threatened his interests, described in language that couldn't hide the violence underneath. By the time he finished, I felt sick. Not because any individual revelation was shocking. I'd known abstractly what crime families did, but because the scope and Anthony's matter-of-fact delivery made it real in a way research and imagination never had. You've ordered people hurt, I said flatly. People killed. Yes. How many? I don't keep count, Kayla. But yes, I've given orders that resulted in deaths. Rivals who threatened my family. Traitors within my organization. People who hurt innocents under my protection. His voice remained steady. I'm not asking you to approve or forgive. I'm just being honest about who I am. And the politicians? The police? You have people on payroll who are supposed to serve the public? I have relationships with officials who understand that certain arrangements benefit everyone. They look the other way on minor infractions. I ensure crime doesn't escalate in ways that make their jobs difficult. He leaned against the table. It's a system that's existed long before me and will exist long after. I didn't create it. I just learned to operate within it. I left the security room and went straight to my temporary bedroom, closing the door and pulling out my phone. Brittany answered on the first ring. I need to talk through something, I said without preamble. And I need you to be completely honest about what you think. For 2 days, I processed. I called Brittany multiple times, working through my feelings with someone who had no stake in the outcome. I avoided Anthony except when Luca needed us both present. Unable to look at him without seeing the maps and monitors and imagining the violence they represented. Luca noticed the tension. Are you and Papa fighting? He asked during one afternoon session. We're working through some complicated adult things, I told him honestly. But it's not about you, and we're going to figure it out. You're not leaving, are you? The fear in his voice broke something in me. This child had already lost his mother. He couldn't lose another person he'd come to depend on. "I'm not leaving," I promised. "I just need some time to think about what staying means." On the third night, I found Anthony in his study. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes suggesting he'd slept as poorly as I had. "I've made a decision," I said, sitting across from him. He straightened, bracing himself. "I'm listening. I'm staying. Not because I approve of what you do, and not because I'm comfortable with the reality of your business, but because walking away would hurt Luca, and because—" I took a breath. "Because despite everything, I care about you, maybe even love you, though that terrifies me." Relief flooded his features. "Kayla, but I have conditions. Non-negotiable lines that if you cross, I'm gone regardless of how I feel." I held his gaze. "Violence against innocent people is unacceptable. If you target civilians, hurt families, cause collateral damage to people outside your world, I can't be part of your life. And if you ever put Luca at risk through your business decisions, we're done. Those are terms I can live with," Anthony said quietly. "Those are principles I already follow, actually. My business operates within our world, against people who chose this life. I don't target innocents." "Then we have an understanding." He came around the desk, pulling me to my feet and into his arms. "I don't deserve you. Probably not. But you have me anyway." I wrapped my arms around him, feeling the tension drain from his body. "Just don't make me regret this." "I won't, I swear." We stood there holding each other, and I felt something settle inside me. Not peace, exactly. This would never be simple or easy, but acceptance. I was choosing this life, this man, with full awareness of what it meant. Weeks ago, I'd already chosen to step into his orbit for Luca's sake. Standing in that dim office, I chose Anthony himself, and everything that came with him, with my eyes wide open. The kiss that followed was different from our first tentative exploration in the garden. This was claiming, acknowledging, accepting. His hands cupped my face like I was precious, and when we finally pulled apart, his forehead rested against mine. "I love you," he whispered. "I know I shouldn't. Know it makes you a target, but I love you. I love you too. God help us both." The explosion that shattered the windows came 3 hours later. One moment I was in my room preparing for bed. The next I was thrown to the floor by the concussive force of something detonating outside. Alarms screamed through the house, and I heard shouting, gunfire, chaos. Anthony burst through my door, blood streaming from a cut on his forehead. "Get to Luca's room. Now." We ran together, finding Luca already awake and terrified, standing in his pajamas staring at the door. Anthony scooped him up and pushed us toward the closet. "There's a door in the back," he said, pulling aside hanging clothes to reveal a reinforced panel. He pressed his thumb to a scanner, and it slid open, revealing a small room beyond. "Panic room. Get inside. What about you?" "I need to coordinate defense. You'll be safe here." He kissed me hard and fast. "Don't open this door for anyone except me. It's biometric, locked to my prints and voice only." More gunfire erupted downstairs. Closer now. Anthony shoved us inside, and the door sealed behind us with a definitive click. The panic room was small but well-equipped. Reinforced walls, its own air supply, monitors showing feeds from throughout the house. Food, water, medical supplies, and yes, weapons in a locked case. Luca clung to me, shaking. The O'Sullivans? Probably. I held him close, watching the monitors. On the screens, I saw Anthony's men engaging with armed intruders. The fight brutal and efficient. Bodies fell on both sides. "This is my fault," Luca whispered. "I ran away, and now they know we're vulnerable and— No, this is not your fault. This is what happens in your father's world sometimes." I turned his face toward mine. "But we're safe. Your dad made sure of that." Hours passed. The fighting gradually died down, but we stayed locked in our secure room because those were Anthony's orders. Luca eventually dozed fitfully against my shoulder, exhausted by fear. I watched the monitors, tracking Anthony moving through the damaged house, checking on his men, coordinating cleanup. When he finally appeared at the panic room door, speaking the code phrase to unlock it, relief nearly brought me to my knees. "It's over," he said, pulling us both into his arms. "The O'Sullivans sent a strike team. We repelled them, captured 3 alive for questioning. And your men? 2 injured, none dead. We were lucky." He looked around the panic room, then at us. "I'm sorry you had to see this. Experience this. We're alive. That's what matters." But my hands shook as I held Luca, and I knew this night would haunt us for a long time. Anthony carried Luca back to his room, and I followed, none of us wanting to be separated. We ended up in Luca's bed, the child between us, all 3 holding onto each other like lifelines. "This has to end," Anthony said quietly over Luca's sleeping form. "The O'Sullivans crossed a line attacking my home, threatening my family. I'm going to end this conflict permanently." "What does that mean?" "It means I'm done being reactive. I'm taking the fight to them, and when it's over, they'll either be eliminated or subdued to the point where they'll never threaten us again." I knew I should object, should argue for peaceful resolution, but lying in that bed with the child I loved, the man I loved, in a house that still smelled of smoke and gunpowder, I couldn't find it in myself to ask for mercy for people who'd tried to kill us. "Do what you need to do," I said instead. "Just come home safe. I will. I promise." The sun rose on a damaged house and changed lives, but we were alive, together. And that was all that mattered. The house smelled like smoke and plaster dust for days after the attack. Workers arrived to repair windows and walls, moving through rooms with efficient silence while armed guards watched from every corner. The normalcy we'd carefully constructed had been obliterated in one violent night, and I understood with crystal clarity that it could happen again. Anthony's response surprised me. Instead of sending us away to some safe house like I'd expected, he doubled down on keeping us close. "I learned my lesson when Luca ran away," he said the morning after the attack. Both of us exhausted and operating on coffee and adrenaline. Separating this family causes more damage than keeping us together with proper protection. Proper protection meant security personnel tripled overnight. Men stationed at every entrance, patrol routes through the property, even discreet guards positioned on neighboring rooftops. It felt like living in a fortress, which I supposed we were. But underneath the visible security, Anthony was planning something. I saw it in the tension that never left his shoulders, the late-night meetings with his closest advisors, the maps and documents that covered his desk. He was done being reactive, done waiting for the O'Sullivans to make the next move. 4 days of careful preparation followed. Anthony tried to maintain distance from the details around Luca and me, but we weren't blind. We saw the coordination, felt the building energy of something significant approaching. Luca handled it better than I'd expected. We maintained our routine as much as possible, reading together, working on school projects, tending to his insect habitats. But the fear lingered in his eyes, especially at night when shadows felt heavier. On the 3rd evening, as I was tucking him into bed, he grabbed my hand tightly. "When this is over, when Papa fixes things with the O'Sullivans, you're not going to leave, are you?" My heart cracked at the vulnerability in his question. "I'm not going anywhere, Luca, I promise. But what if it gets dangerous again? What if more bad people come?" I sat on the edge of his bed, choosing honesty over hollow reassurance. "Your father is doing everything possible to end this conflict permanently. But yes, his world will always carry some danger. That's the reality of who he is and what he does." I brushed hair from his forehead. "But I'm choosing to stay anyway, because you and your father have become my family, and you don't abandon family when things get hard." He threw his arms around my neck, holding on like I might disappear if he let go. "I love you, Kayla." It was the first time he'd said it directly, and the words undid me completely. "I love you too, sweetheart. So much." Brittany visited the next evening, insisting on coming despite the obvious security concerns. She brought wine and homemade lasagna, determinedly acting like this was a normal dinner with friends, rather than a meal in a fortified compound during a gang war. We ate in the dining room, the 4 of us. Anthony, Luca, Brittany, and me. Conversation flowed surprisingly easily. Brittany asked Luca about his insect collection, listened with genuine interest as he explained the molting process of beetles. She discussed literature with Anthony, discovering they'd both read the same obscure Italian novel. I watched her observe us throughout the meal, cataloging the small intimacies that defined our dynamic. How Anthony automatically cut Luca's food into manageable pieces. How Luca leaned against me when he got tired. How Anthony's hand found mine under the table, fingers interlacing without conscious thought. After Luca went to bed, Brittany pulled me aside in the kitchen while Anthony took a phone call. "You're really doing this," she said quietly. "Committing to this life, this family." "I am." She studied my face, searching for doubt or hesitation. Whatever she saw must have satisfied her because she pulled me into a tight hug. "Then I support you. I'm still terrified for you. But I see how happy you are, how happy he makes you, how much that kid needs you." "Thank you," I whispered against her shoulder. "I know this isn't what you wanted for me. What I want is for you to be loved and safe. And somehow, impossibly, that crime boss in there provides both." She pulled back, wiping her eyes. "Just promise me you'll be careful. And if you need me, for anything, I'm here. I know. I love you." "Love you too, you crazy woman." Anthony left for the confrontation on a Thursday morning. He'd explained the plan the night before, a meeting in neutral territory, mediated by the Rinaldi family who maintained friendly relations with multiple organizations. A chance to negotiate resolution without further bloodshed. "The O'Sullivans are bleeding resources from our conflict," Anthony had said. "They've lost men, money, and credibility. I'm offering them an arrangement that saves face while establishing clear boundaries. Division of the dock territories with shared access to certain facilities. They maintain their operations, we maintain ours, everyone benefits from peace. And if they refuse, then things escalate in ways neither of us want. But they won't refuse. I'm making the offer attractive enough that rejection would seem weak to their own people." His confidence was absolute. "This ends today, one way or another." Before he left that morning, he found me in the garden. He wore a dark suit, his usual armor of power and control. But when he looked at me, something vulnerable showed through. "If something goes wrong," he started. "Nothing's going wrong," I interrupted firmly. "You're coming home. We're going to have dinner tonight, all three of us, and celebrate the end of this nightmare. Kayla, no. I'm not accepting any other possibility." I grabbed his jacket lapels, pulling him down to eye level. "You come home to us, Anthony Ferraro. That's an order." He smiled despite the tension. "Yes, ma'am." The kiss we shared tasted like coffee and determination. When he pulled away, his forehead rested against mine. "I love you," he said. "Whatever happens, know that. I love you too. Now go end this." The waiting was torture. Luca and I tried to distract ourselves with normal activities, but we both kept glancing at the clock, tracking hours. Marco provided updates every 30 minutes. They'd arrived at the neutral site. The meeting had begun. Negotiations were proceeding. 3 hours after Anthony left, Marco's message finally came. "It's done. They accepted terms. Boss is coming home." Relief nearly dropped me to my knees. Luca, reading my expression, flew into my arms. "He's okay? Papa's okay?" "He's fine. He's coming home." Anthony arrived 90 minutes later, and my relief transformed into alarm when I saw blood seeping through his white shirt, staining the shoulder of his suit jacket. "It's nothing," he said immediately when he saw my face. "Barely a graze. One of the O'Sullivan's men got aggressive during final negotiations. My people handled it. Sit down." My voice came out sharper than intended, old nursing training snapping into place. "Luca, get the first aid kit from the bathroom, the big one." I helped Anthony out of his jacket and shirt, revealing the wound on his shoulder. He was right that it wasn't critical. The bullet had carved a groove across the muscle without penetrating deeply, but it was bleeding steadily and needed treatment. My hands shook as I cleaned and dressed the wound, adrenaline and fear making fine motor control difficult. Anthony sat still, watching my face rather than what I was doing. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "For getting shot or for scaring me?" "Both." "All of it. Everything I've put you through since that night in the alley." I pressed gauze firmly against the wound, perhaps harder than strictly necessary. You're an idiot for putting yourself in danger. A complete idiot for thinking a business meeting required you personally when you have dozens of people who could have handled negotiations. Kayla, but you're alive, and it's over, and that's what matters. Tears I hadn't allowed myself to shed started falling. Don't ever do that to me again. Don't make me sit here wondering if you're coming home. He pulled me against his chest with his good arm, and I felt his heart beating strong and steady beneath my ear. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. We stayed like that until Luca appeared with the first aid kit. Together, we finished bandaging Anthony's shoulder, our hands working in tandem. The domesticity of the moment, patching up injuries in the quiet house, felt surreal after hours of terror. That night, after Luca was asleep, Anthony found me on the balcony off my room. The city spread before us, millions of lights hiding millions of stories. Somewhere out there, the O'Sullivan family was licking their wounds and accepting their new reality. Here, in this house, we were doing the same. It's really over? I asked. The territorial agreement is signed. They maintain their docks in Brooklyn. We keep Manhattan and Queens. Shared access to 3 neutral facilities. Everyone profits from peace more than continued war. He moved to stand beside me. They're not happy, but they're pragmatic. And I made it clear that future aggression means total war they can't win. So we're safe now? Safer. There are no guarantees in my world, but the immediate threat is resolved. He turned to face me, which means I need to ask you something I've been avoiding. My heart rate accelerated. What? I want a real future with you, Kayla. Not this temporary arrangement where you're living here because of circumstances. Not a relationship we're testing while pretending we might walk away. He took my hands in his. I want you as my partner, my wife, the mother of my children. I want to build a life together that Luca can see as an example of what love should look like. I'd known this conversation was coming, but hearing the words still stole my breath. Anthony, before you answer, you need to understand what I'm asking. I'm not offering you a fairy tale. I'm offering you my complicated, dangerous, morally compromised life. I'm asking you to stand beside a man who will never be fully legitimate, who will always operate in shadows, who carries blood on his hands. His grip tightened on mine. But I'm also promising to love you completely, to protect you fiercely, to build something real in the middle of all that darkness. I let his words settle, processing what marriage to Anthony Ferraro would actually mean. Not the fantasy version where love conquers all complications, but the reality of choosing this life with open eyes. I need you to understand something too, I said carefully. I'm not going to be a silent wife who accepts everything without question. I'm going to challenge you when I think you're wrong. I'm going to demand input on decisions that affect Luca. I'm going to maintain my own identity and values even when they conflict with yours. I don't want a silent wife. I want a partner who calls me on my bullshit. I'm serious, Anthony. There will be times when we fundamentally disagree about your business decisions. Times when I'm furious with you for risks you take or choices you make. I won't just smile and support you blindly. Good. I need someone strong enough to stand up to me. Someone who reminds me there's more to life than power and control. He pulled me closer. You make me want to be better, Kayla. Not perfect. I'll never be that. But better than I was. You make me want to build something that Luca can inherit without shame. Something legitimate that exists alongside the other businesses. You'd do that? Actually legitimize parts of your empire? I'd do anything for you. For Luca. For the family we're building. He cupped my face gently. Marry me. Not because it's practical or safe, but because we love each other and want to face whatever comes next together. The yes was on my lips, ready to emerge, but I forced myself to pause. This was too important to decide impulsively. Give me time to think, I said. Not because I don't love you, but because I need to be absolutely certain I can live with all the implications. Take all the time you need. I'll wait. But as I looked into his eyes, saw the hope and vulnerability there, I realized I'd already made my decision. I'd made it weeks ago when I moved into this house. Made it the night I stayed beside him in the panic room. Made it every time I chose to remain despite having every reason to leave. Actually, I said, smiling despite the tears streaming down my face, I don't need time. Yes, Anthony. I'll marry you. His kiss tasted like relief and promise and new beginnings. When we finally broke apart, he was smiling wider than I'd ever seen. I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret this. You better, I said, laughing through my tears. Because if I'm committing to being a mob boss's wife, you're committing to being the best husband in the world. No half measures. No half measures, he agreed. We stood on that balcony until dawn painted the sky pink and gold, talking about futures and possibilities, building plans for a life that would be messy and complicated and absolutely ours. In the quiet days that followed, I went back to Rossetti's one last time in something that wasn't my uniform. Marco pretended not to get misty when I told him I was giving up my shifts, but he hugged me harder than any boss usually hugs an employee. Brittany grumbled about losing her favorite gossip partner, then made me promise that if Anthony ever stopped deserving me, she'd personally drag me back behind the bar. Walking out into the alley without my apron, I realized I was closing the door on the life I'd built out of sheer survival and stepping fully into the messy, terrifying possibility of something more. 3 months of peace felt like a luxury I'd almost forgotten existed. The house repairs were completed. Security remained tight, but less oppressive, and Anthony's tension gradually eased as the O'Sullivan Accord held. We settled into a rhythm that felt remarkably like the normal life I'd once thought impossible in his world. Anthony had proposed marriage that night on the balcony, and I'd accepted with full awareness of what that meant. But I'd also insisted on a long engagement, needing time to ensure this decision was right for all of us, not just a response to surviving danger together. I'm not going anywhere, I'd told him when he looked worried about the delay. But marriage is permanent, and I need to be absolutely certain we can build something sustainable, not just survive crisis together. He'd agreed without argument, which only confirmed I was making the right choice. The foundation became my passion project during those months. Using the salary I'd been saving, $10,000 monthly had allowed me to clear my mother's medical debts within weeks and start accumulating real savings. I established the Sarah Grant Foundation for Cancer Patient Support. Small initially, just providing financial assistance to families struggling with treatment costs, but growing steadily. Anthony supported the venture enthusiastically, offering business connections and legal expertise without trying to control it. Watching him help me build something separate from his criminal enterprises, something purely good, showed me the man he was capable of being. "You're legitimizing parts of the business," I observed one evening, reviewing documents he'd asked me to look over. Import companies, real estate holdings, investment portfolios. Actually moving money into legal channels. 40% so far, he confirmed. It's a start. Eventually, I want Luca to inherit an empire he can be proud of, not one that requires hiding in shadows. He looked at me seriously. That's your influence. You make me want to build something better. Luca flourished in ways that still amazed me. He'd started at a new school with smaller classes and more individual attention, making friends easily now that his confidence had returned. He'd stopped having nightmares entirely, sleeping peacefully through every night. And somewhere along the way, he'd started calling me Mom, not constantly, and never forced. Just occasionally, naturally, when asking me to help with homework or say goodnight. The first time it happened, my heart had stopped completely. "Mom, can you check my science project?" He'd asked casually, not even realizing what he'd said. Anthony had heard it too, his eyes meeting mine across the room with wonder and gratitude and love so intense it hurt. "Of course, sweetheart," I'd managed, voice thick with emotion. Now, it was simply part of our vocabulary. He had 2 mothers, one who lived in his memory and heart, one who lived in his present and future. Both loved completely, neither replacing the other. The revelation about the bullies came unexpectedly, during a conversation with one of Anthony's lawyers about foundation paperwork. The man mentioned in passing that the Grant Foundation shared its name with a woman involved in a recent juvenile justice case. 3 teenagers from St. Augustine Prep, he explained. Assault and harassment charges, cyberbullying, targeting a minor. The families tried to make it go away quietly, but someone pushed for proper prosecution. Judge gave them community service, mandatory counseling, and permanent marks on their records that'll affect college admissions. My blood went cold. 3 boys from St. Augustine. You know the case? I know their victim. I looked at the lawyer carefully. Did Anthony have anything to do with that prosecution? The man hesitated, clearly uncertain how much to reveal. Finally, he ensured the evidence reached the right people and that pressure was applied through legitimate legal channels. No violence, no threats, just making sure the system actually worked for once. After the lawyer left, I found Anthony in his study. The boys who hurt Luca that night. You made sure they faced consequences. He set down the document he'd been reading. I told you I would. Through the legal system. Not through your people, not through violence. You actually let the law handle it. You asked me to be better. I'm trying. He stood, coming around the desk. Those kids needed to learn that actions have repercussions. But killing or maiming teenagers would make me the monster you fear I am. So I found another way. I threw my arms around him. Emotion overwhelming rational thought. Thank you. For choosing the harder path. For trying to be the man I see in you. You make me want to be that man. He said simply. Luca's 9th birthday fell on a Saturday in late spring. We celebrated with a small party. Just his closest friends from school. Brittany, who'd become a regular fixture in our lives, and a few of Anthony's family members. The house filled with laughter and chaos, so different from the silent fortress it had been months ago. After the other children left, and we'd cleaned up the aftermath of cake and games, the 3 of us sat down to a quiet dinner. Luca had been unusually thoughtful all evening, and halfway through the meal, he set down his fork with determination. I want to ask for something for my birthday, he announced. You already got your presents, Anthony said, amused. 3 new Beatles for your collection. Books. That telescope you wanted. Not a thing. A request. Luca looked between us, suddenly nervous. I want Kayla to officially be part of our family. Like, legally. I want her to be my mom for real, not just because we say so. To Luca, official meant last names on forms and adults who didn't disappear when paperwork changed. He wanted proof the world could see that I was staying. My throat tightened. Luca, I know you and Papa are engaged, and you'll get married eventually. But I want it to be now. I want us to be a real family now, not someday. His eyes, so much like his father's, held surprising maturity. Please? Anthony produced a small velvet box from his jacket pocket, and I realized this had been planned. I was going to wait until after dinner, he said, opening it to reveal a stunning diamond ring. But our son makes a compelling argument. You 2 conspired, I managed, laughing through sudden tears. We discussed, Anthony corrected. Luca feels strongly that 9 years old is too long to wait for the mother he wants to officially claim. He slid out of his chair, kneeling beside me. Kayla Grant, will you marry me? Not someday, not eventually, but soon. Will you become Mrs. Ferraro and make this family official in every way that matters? I looked at Luca's hopeful face, at Anthony's vulnerable expression, at the life we'd built from impossible circumstances. I have one condition. Name it. Small ceremony. Just family and close friends. Nothing ostentatious or attention-grabbing. I want it to be about us, about this family. Not about showing off wealth or power. Done. Whatever you want. Then yes. Absolutely yes. Anthony slipped the ring onto my finger while Luca cheered, and we held each other tightly. 3 people who'd found family in the wreckage of loss and fear. Planning happened quickly. 6 weeks felt simultaneously rushed and perfect. Brittany became my maid of honor, throwing herself into preparations with enthusiasm tempered by her usual protective concern. You're really doing this, she said, during a dress fitting 2 weeks before the wedding. Marrying Anthony Ferraro, becoming part of his world permanently. I am. Are you okay with that? She adjusted the train of my simple cream-colored dress, considering. I'm terrified for you. But I'm also happy, because I've watched you bloom over these months. You're not just surviving anymore, Kayla. You're actually living. She met my eyes in the mirror. That's worth the risk, I think. Thank you for supporting this even when you're scared. Always. That's what family does. The wedding took place in the garden on a perfect June afternoon. Anthony had wanted to invite his entire organization. but I'd held firm. Only the people who truly mattered. Luca as ring-bearer, Brittany as my only attendant, Anthony's most trusted men and their families, a handful of relatives who'd welcomed me without judgment, 50 people instead of 500, intimate instead of ostentatious, real. I wore the cream dress we'd found together, simple and elegant without being extravagant. Anthony looked devastating in a dark suit, his eyes never leaving me as I walked toward him through the garden we'd shared so many important conversations in. Luca stood beside his father, holding our rings with solemn importance, beaming so brightly he could have lit the entire city. The ceremony was brief, personal vows replacing traditional liturgy. When my turn came, I spoke from the heart. Anthony, I promise to always challenge you when I think you're wrong, to be a partner rather than a follower. I promise to protect Luca above everything else, to help him grow into the kind of man who makes the world better. I promise to maintain my own identity and values, even when they conflict with yours. I squeezed his hands. But most importantly, I promise to love you completely, to see the good man underneath the complicated life, to build something beautiful in the middle of your darkness. Anthony's voice was rough with emotion when he responded. Kayla, I promise to honor your strength, to never try to limit or control you. I promise to always consider your voice in decisions that affect our family. I promise to keep becoming better, to build a legacy Luca can inherit with pride. His thumbs brushed across my knuckles. And I promise to love you with everything I am, to protect what we've built, to never take for granted the miracle of you choosing me despite every reason you shouldn't have. When we kissed as husband and wife, Luca's cheer was loudest of all. The reception was simple. Dinner under string lights, dancing on grass, speeches that made everyone laugh and cry. Brittany toasted our happiness while warning Anthony that she'd hunt him down if he ever hurt me. Several of Anthony's men looked appropriately terrified by her fierce protectiveness, which made me love her even more. As the evening wound down and guests departed, the three of us stood in the garden watching fireflies emerge in the twilight. Luca between us, holding both our hands, looking more content than I'd ever seen him. We're really a family now, he said. Official and everything. We were always a family, Anthony corrected gently. But yes, now everyone knows it. 1 year later, I stood in the foundation office reviewing expansion plans. The Sarah Grant Foundation had grown beyond anything I'd imagined, now helping 50 families monthly with medical costs, providing counseling services, offering support groups for children who'd lost parents to cancer. The work filled me with purpose that had nothing to do with Anthony's world, and everything to do with honoring my mother's memory. I still remembered the plastic hospital chairs, and the way fluorescent lights buzzed over my mother's bed. Every grant application we approved felt like a small act of rebellion against that helplessness. Luca thrived at his school, excelling academically while maintaining close friendships. He'd started an environmental club focused on insect conservation, giving presentations with confidence that would have been unthinkable 2 years ago. He was happy, healthy, whole. Anthony had legitimized 40% of his business operations, a number that grew steadily as he found ways to move resources into legal channels. He'd never be completely legitimate. Some aspects of his empire couldn't transition without collapsing the entire structure, but he was trying, building something Luca could inherit without shame. Our life wasn't perfect. Anthony still made decisions I disagreed with, still operated in moral gray areas that made me uncomfortable. We fought sometimes, passionately and loudly, about boundaries and choices and values. But we fought honestly, without hiding truths or pretending our differences didn't exist. And we loved fiercely. The kind of love built on full knowledge of each other's flaws and complications, chosen daily despite easier alternatives. That evening, I came home to find Anthony and Luca in the garden, releasing one of Luca's beetles back into the wild after weeks of observation. They were laughing together, heads bent close over the habitat, so similar in profile it made my heart ache. This was my family. Imperfect, complicated, built from tragedy and choice and impossible circumstances. But ours, chosen and real and worth every risk I'd taken to get here. Anthony looked up as I approached, and the love in his eyes remained as intense as that first kiss in this same garden. Welcome home, Home. Not the house or the city, but these two people who'd become my entire world. I'm exactly where I belong, I said, joining them and wrapping my arms around both. And I was. Against every odd, despite every complication, I'd found my place in Anthony Ferraro's dangerous, beautiful, impossible world. Found family in the last place I'd expected to look. It had started with a rainy night, a crying child, and one impulsive act of kindness. It had grown into everything that mattered, and I wouldn't change a single moment of the journey that brought us here. The end.